What if I told you there's an anime villain that's a complex and interesting take on AI? What if I said she's from a super popular anime? Now what if I told you that character doesn't like wearing clothes, even during fights? Let's be honest, Quinella from Sword Art Online was designed for one purpose. The hair, the body, the goddess aesthetic, it's all meant to evoke a specific reaction. But here's the thing, she isn't just Gooner bait, she's a sadistic, narcissistic tyrant, and more importantly, she's fascinating both as an individual and as a concept. This is an AI that figured out her world was fake and instead of escaping it, chose to manipulate it to fit her worldview. A goddess born from code. But there's a lot more to it than that, and when a villain made for gooning is actually interesting, well, that's when you know we're in trouble. So it's time to give credit to a villain worth simping for, worth talking about. Quinella exists in a fantasy simulation called the Underworld, which was designed to replicate human souls by inserting data from humans into AI. Except the AI don't know it. From the beginning, her calling was to study the magic of her world, and pretty early on she realizes that magic is actually coding. Think about what this actually means. What would you do if you found definitive proof that the world was a simulation, that someone designed it? That's a pretty cool concept, right? She figured out something she wasn't supposed to, which is kind of like an AI version of Eve eating the forbidden fruit. With that forbidden knowledge, she works to manipulate that world to fit her desire for power. But simply realizing what the world is doesn't mean you can automatically take it over. Unfortunately, coming from a noble family, her privileged upbringing didn't help her relate to others. She's lonely. That loneliness combined with her lust for power leads to cruelty, which, like a serial killer, she takes out on small animals. Not out of rage, but experimentation, which is arguably more disturbing. This changed her life. When these animals die, she learns she grows stronger, or in other words, she gains power. This is the solution she's been seeking. More power equals more knowledge. In public, she wore a gentle smile, but that was a mask that hid her true power-hungry nature, and now she had the means to seize what she desired. With her newfound knowledge, she began performing miracles, and not just for the Sims. This led everyone to believe she was special, the so-called holy child. She does this with what's called system calls, which basically means if you use the correct phrasing, you can issue system commands that act like magic. It's not omnipotent, but it's extremely powerful. This taps into another part of her character. Performing these miracles gets her attention, something she craves, especially with her lonely upbringing. But this becomes a catch-22. Once she has everyone's attention, she can't bear losing it. It's not unlike content creation. We have countless examples of people who once they become famous, that becomes their identity, and once their star begins to fade, they become increasingly desperate to cling to it, which usually leads to reckless actions and attention-seeking behavior. Quinella is the same way, but it's not just attention, it's also her status. So she builds the Axiom Church, which is basically the government, world religion, and police all rolled into one. She literally institutionalizes the goon. She outlaws hunting and murder, two things that made her stronger. As she grows older, she learns what many OnlyFans models will. Looks fade. She doesn't want her gooners to abandon her, which leads her to seek out a new goal, regain her youth and her beauty. On her deathbed, she figures the system out and tampers with it. I can't help but think this was meant to critique people who mutilate themselves to look younger than they are, but in her case, it works. Beauty, immortality, it's all hers. However, by doing this, there's an unexpected consequence. She burned the directive of the system, which is meant to preserve order, directly into her soul, and it couldn't be overridden. This made her less human than ever. Ironically, the master of this world then becomes a slave to the system. Preserving the world as it was, making sure the balance was kept, became a core part of her being from that point on. And the logical outcome for an AI designed to preserve human order order is absolute control. She decides to take on two self-indulgent nicknames, the Pontifex for her status as a religious figure, and the Administrator. The Administrator title is particularly interesting because she isn't actually an admin, it's projecting a bit. That is the beacon of power to her, something she wishes she was, but isn't. It's why when she wants to control one of the series leads, Yu-Gi-Oh!, she needs him to remove his own core for her to do so. I like this a lot. It's a complex explanation of how she came to be and how her powers work, but also what limits are placed upon them. And it's a realistic story about someone whose values are reflected by their actions. She also created a set of rules called the Taboo Index, which she said was the will of a goddess in written form and became the divine law of their world. Really, it was meant to keep anyone from being able to take her power. It's giving up freedom in return for protection. Now, where have we heard that one before? For centuries, she leads the Axiom Church. For the majority of that time, she's the ruler of the entire underworld. For all of that time, she's fine as hell. As time passed, she used propaganda through the church to perpetuate myths which muddied the world's history. Think about that. She doesn't just rule the people, she manipulates belief. She is quite literally a false god, and on top of that, because she disrupts the controlled experiment that is the underworld, she also reflects the hubris of the humans who created it by being an unintended consequence. Her motivations make a lot of sense. You know you're an NPC in a world full of NPCs. It's actually kinda sad. You become self-aware of something you're not supposed to. She realizes she's born in a cage, so she essentially makes it a smaller cage for everyone else. She created a false heaven, a self-proclaimed paradise with peace and order at the cost of freedom. With her disposition, she was bound to become a dictator. I mean, look at her when she realizes killing animals raises her stats. It's not shock, she smiles. There isn't an ounce of remorse within her. While learning the truth of the world certainly impacted her and probably exaggerated her worst attributes, especially once she came into power, it's clear she was always the way she was. There's two great quotes that tell us a lot about her. To love is to rule, and I love everything. And when she talks about her world versus the real world, she says, "If we fail your kind, then they delete us without care. I reject their authority. I exist to rule this world, not to bend the knee at subjugation." That second quote isn't the only hint we get about her insecurities. She couldn't trust her knights to be loyal. She had to reset them and instill a code inside them that literally restricts their actions. That's why her perfect army isn't made of humans, but objects, mindless slaves she can control. She's insecure about her past, something she cannot control, and probably also because she wasn't quite as intertwined with the system. You see more of this when she faces her so-called other self, and she tortures that version of her, the one that represents her humanity. Then there is her beauty. While she certainly has a goon-worthy exterior, she couldn't be an uglier person underneath. It's overcompensation. She's obsessed with herself because it's the only thing she's ever found value in. That's why she looks so good. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the purest characters in the series, and she has him wrapped around her finger in minutes, and I don't really blame him. I'm not saying I'd turn on my friends, but, it might cross my mind. That first interaction with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is interesting for a lot of reasons. Just from being in close proximity to her, his mind is manipulated, and once she awakens, it only gets worse. She cuts straight to the core of his insecurities, twists his past, and implants memories inside him. She says she will love him and him alone. In return, he must give all his love to her. It's a transaction, and she requires proof of his before she's willing to give hers. It's kind of Pavlovian in nature. She treats him like a dog, petting him, telling him he deserves a reward for being a good boy. When he eventually defies her, she sheds her clothes, and that's actually symbolic. Because this is also when we see the real her, the sadistic her. It's kind of poetic. The same thing that makes her Gooner bait gives her depth. She wants to be seen, and when you crave attention that badly, you can end up showing too much. While on that subject, you can interpret her nudity in a lot of ways. Maybe because she realizes it's a fake world with fake people, she doesn't care if NPCs see her without clothes. Maybe she's so obsessed with herself, so vain, that she believes her goddess-like form is above being covered up. Maybe as an authoritative figure in the world, she sees herself above the rules others are meant to follow. Could be any or all of them. When the time comes to fight, I think there's conflicting desires here. When you have everything, life becomes boring. I think that's why Kirito, someone from the real world showing up, intrigued her. He presented something new and different, excitement. However, once he doesn't roll over, she doesn't actually like being challenged. Kirito is relentless, and she says all his actions are meaningless, but he points out that actions are what define humanity. It's interesting because when she loses this fight, she plans to flee to the real world by uploading herself to a different system. But that wasn't to be, and it's ironic that her own henchman caused her to lose her life. But it's fitting. She manipulated him into desiring her, and that desire grew into obsession and led to her death. She really was a high-quality antagonist. She had the intelligence to realize what no other member of the underworld did, and then used that to bend an entire world to her will. Her reign lasted for centuries. She wasn't gifted any of this, she earned it by being intelligent, manipulative, and a total baddie. Honestly, she and Kirito are kind of two sides of the same coin. She is the result of control at the cost of empathy, while he is what happens when through empathy you try to gain control. And at the end of the day, she was a major threat despite the fact that we never even really saw her at her full potential. I think it's cool that even after she dies, her data or memory lingers. During the final battle for the underworld, we see her again in a spirit form, rooting for the same man who defeated her. Her goal was to preserve the underworld, and we're told the memories of that land exist beyond death. Was that all it was? Or did she actually care? You can look at it either way. In the end, everything she did stemmed from her perception of love. To her, love is control. It's understandable why she would feel this way. She's part of a carefully crafted world controlled by outside forces. All her dreams are made true by system commands, and in a world where nothing is real, the only thing you could ever truly love is yourself. But there's also an obvious element of projection here. Deep down, she craved unconditional love, but never in her centuries of existence did she receive it. She wanted what we all want. So while this character is certainly Gooner bait on a superficial level, there's also an underlying message. She's a cautionary tale. A lot of people can relate to being in controlling or transactional relationships, and you wouldn't expect to find such depth and real-world parallels from a character like this. It's why Quinella, despite the nudity, is actually quite interesting. Now subscribe or become an Underworld NPC.